The Soul, 3 Safari Disaster. Chapter 1, The Gates of Wonder. The greeting at the orbital terminal had been delivered in a flawless, synthesized high galactic accent, but the smile on the human receptionist's face had been entirely real.
Welcome to Pangea Prime,
The broadcast had chimed.
where the deep past meets the galactic future.
Tulak Vor leaned his upper torso against the polished wood trim of the observation car's panoramic window, his secondary set of arms folded neatly across his embroidered silk tunic. Below the sleek maglev tour train, the landscape of the terraformed reserve opened up like a living canvas of emerald and gold. A massive, engineered river snaked through a valley of giant, feathery cycads, flora that hadn't seen the light of a sun in 65 million years.
Incredible.
A Solarian diplomat murmured 2 rows ahead, his large, amphibious eyes wide as he pressed a premium data lens against the glass.
The genetic sequencing required to stabilize the avian-reptilian transition matrix. It's a milestone of biological engineering, and the humans just use it for leisure.
They are a strange species.
A Volus merchant wheezed from his pressurized booster seat, adjusting his gold-plated breathing apparatus.
They sit on a mountain of priceless genetic intellectual property, and instead of selling it to the core medical syndicates, they build hotels. But the profit margins, structurally magnificent.
Right on cue, the maglev train slowed to a whisper, gliding onto a massive concrete suspension bridge that spanned the wide river valley. The vehicle's automated audio guide chimed, a warm, orchestral melody that swelled with theatrical timing.
To your left, honored guests, observe the giants of the late Jurassic.
The soft human voice narrated through the cabin speakers.
The Brachiosaurus, growing up to 25 meters in length, these gentle herbivores require over 400 kilograms of foliage every single day.
Through the mist of a crashing waterfall, a massive, column-like neck rose above the tree line. The creature's skin was a deep, mottled gray, glistening under the artificial sun lamps of the atmospheric dome. It let out a long, sweeping bellow, a sound so deep and resonant that it caused the glass panels of the observation car to vibrate with a pleasant hum. A flock of small, colorful protobirds scattered from the creature's crown, spinning through the humid air. The tourists gasped, a dozen luxury datapads flashing in unison as they captured the spectacle. It was a perfect, manicured paradise, a playground for the galaxy's billionaires, built on a death world by the only species crazy enough to call it home. At the front of the cabin, leaning casually against the reinforced emergency door, was their designated human ranger. He didn't look like a soldier. He wore a crisp, tailored khaki uniform, a wide-brimmed hat tilted slightly forward to shade his eyes, and a small, silver badge pinned to his chest that read, Ranger Miller. He wasn't looking at the dinosaurs. He was calmly chewing a piece of mint-flavored stim gum, his eyes scanning the alien passengers with the mild, patient boredom of a seasoned tour guide.
"Excuse me, Ranger."
Tulak called out, tilting his datapad toward the human.
The brochure mentioned that the kinetic containment grid operates at a military-grade megawatt frequency. Is it true that a Class 10 apex predator cannot even perceive the boundary?
Miller glanced up, offering a polite, practiced smile.
That's right, sir. The fences project a localized neural disruption field. To a T-Rex or a raptor, the boundary line just feels like a severe headache. They learn to avoid it within 48 hours of hatching. You're safer in this car than you are in a core world shuttle.
The Volus merchant chuckled, his suit vents hissing.
Splendid. Excellent. I like safety.
Then the music stopped. It didn't fade out. The synthesized orchestra cut off with a sharp, digital pop that made the Solarian diplomat jump. The soothing, warm ambient lighting overhead flickered once, dimmed to a dull yellow, and then the maglev train gave a strange, sickening shudder. The gentle magnetic hum beneath the floorboards died completely, replaced by the heavy mechanical groaning of emergency brake pads clamping down onto the solid steel guide rails. The train slammed to a sudden, ungraceful halt right in the middle of the suspension bridge, throwing the wealthy tourists forward against their safety restraints. Outside, the brilliant, warm sun lamps lining the dome's ceiling began to shut down, one by one, plunging the vibrant green valley into a cold, artificial twilight. Miller's casual posture vanished instantly. He didn't panic, but his hand moved with fluid, military precision straight to the heavy comm unit clipped to his shoulder. He keyed the channel, his brow furrowing as he stared out at the rapidly darkening jungle.
Control, this is Ranger Miller on Tour Track 04.
He said, his voice dropping its tourist-friendly cheer, becoming cold and flat.
We got a main grid drop on the bridge sector. The maglev just lost primary power. Advise status, over.
The comm unit didn't return a human voice. It emitted a long, agonizing burst of pure, high-frequency static that caused the Solarian to cover his auditory slits. A mile away, deep within the dense, dark foliage of Sector 4, a massive, 50-foot steel tower stood silent. The bright purple energy fields that usually crackled between the containment pillars had vanished, leaving nothing but an open, empty gap in the wire. And from the shadows of the uncontained wild, something let out a low, chest-compressing rumble that shook the river below. Chapter 2, Standard Operating Procedures. For the first 2 hours, the mood inside Observation Car 04 wasn't one of terror. It was one of profound, wealthy irritation.
This is unacceptable.
The Volus merchant wheezed, his gold-plated pressure suit pacing back and forth along the narrow aisle of the stalled maglev train.
I am missing a high-priority trade negotiation with the Citadel syndicates. Every microcycle this vehicle spends stationary is costing my investment firm thousands of credits. I will be filing a formal complaint with the Earth Regulatory Bureau.
Tulakvor didn't answer. He remained leaned against the panoramic window, his datapad propped up on his knee. The live view counter on his broadcast stream was climbing steadily, fueled by the sheer novelty of a luxury Terran safari experiencing a technical hiccup.
Relax, everyone.
Ranger Miller said, his voice a calm, smooth baritone as he leaned against the conductor's locked console. He hadn't removed his wide-brimmed hat, and his stim gum was still clicking rhythmically between his teeth.
Standard protocol for a grid drop on the bridge loop is a static hold. The main automated repair drones are already cycling through the subsystem hubs. We stay inside the reinforced plasteel chassis, enjoy the climate control, and let the engineers do their job. You're in a pressurized fortress. Nothing out there can get through this glass.
And if the main power doesn't return within the cycle?
The Solarian diplomat asked, his large eyes blinking with nervous calculation.
Then a heavy extraction showed the parts from the main lodge, hooks onto our guide rails, and drags us back to the terminal.
Miller replied, checking his wrist chronometer with an unbothered shrug.
It's a routine maintenance hitch. We get maybe 3 or 4 of these a local month.
Tulak tilted his datapad toward the human.
A routine hitch? What causes a military-grade kinetic barrier to drop during a standard rainstorm, Ranger?
Miller let out a dry, slightly cynical chuckle.
Usually, guests. Last week, a group of 3-ton Krogans decided they wanted a closer look at the Ankylosaurus paddock, so they tried to climb the secondary dampening towers to get a high-res holosync. They ended up short-circuiting the entire eastern quadrant with their personal kinetic shields. The week before that, a diplomatic party of Vorsha ignored the biohazard signs and cleared their throat sacs near a primary fiber optic junction box. Their saliva has an acidic pH of 1.4. It literally melted the data cables right out of conduit.
The Solarian diplomat winced, his skin shifting to a paler shade of green.
Biologically illiterate primitives.
Exactly.
Miller said,
Human tech is built to handle the dinosaurs. It's the civilized galaxy we have trouble engineering against. So just sit tight. The Rangers of the main hub are probably scrubbing some influencers' radioactive energy drink spill off a server rack right now.
The reassurance worked. The tourists settled back into their plush leather seats, the Volus returning to his digital ledgers while the Solarian pulled out a nutrient pouch. The train remained suspended 50 meters above the raging river valley, a safe, warm bubble of high technology looking out over a dark, primordial world. Then, the emergency speaker on Miller's shoulder harness finally crackled to life. The sound wasn't the clean, automated ping of a resolved maintenance report. It was a chaotic, high-frequency distortion of screaming alarms, shouting human voices, and a deep, rhythmic crashing sound that made the radio speaker rattle inside its plastic housing.
All units, this is Hub Control. We have a Class 4 multi-sector contamination event.
The dispatcher's voice was frantic, gasping for breath.
The Hanner tourist party in Sector 3 bypassed the security locks on the drainage channels. Their high alkaline moisture trail has completely corroded the primary grounding rails for the entire southern valley. The grid isn't rebooting. I repeat, the southern grid is dead.
Miller's thumb instantly hit the transmit button, his relaxed posture evaporating into rigid, military alignment.
Control, this is Miller on track 04. Confirm status of the Sector 4 perimeter. Has the fence held?
There was a long, agonizing pause filled with the sound of a distant, metallic tearing noise over the radio.
Negative, Miller. The Sector 4 containment towers are dark. The Alpha Tyrannosaurus and the resident Velociraptor pack have cleared the boundary. They are hunting the guidelines. Evacuate your passengers to the nearest.
The transmission cut off with a sickening, wet crunch of static. Miller lowered the radio, his eyes turning slowly toward the massive panoramic window of the observation car. The casual tour guide was gone. His hand drifted down to the heavy, long-barreled kinetic rifle slung over his back, his fingers closing around the cold steel receiver. Chapter 3. The Uncontained Wild.
Ranger?
Tulak whispered, his upper hand trembling as he kept the datapad's lens locked onto the human's face.
What did the radio mean? What is a Class 4 event?
Change of plans, folks.
Miller said, his voice dropping into a flat, level register that carried no trace of the friendly customer service tone he had used for the last 2 hours. He stepped to the center of the aisle, his eyes tracking the dark, thrashing canopy of the jungle at the edge of the bridge.
The static hold protocol is officially void. The tech isn't coming back online, and we are currently sitting in a giant, brightly lit metal container right in the middle of a newly opened hunting ground.
But you said the car was a fortress.
The Volus merchant screamed, his respiratory mask wheezing frantically as he scrambled out of his booster seat.
You said nothing could get through the plasteel.
That was when the T-Rex was on the other side of a 5-megawatt neural field.
Miller said, reaching up to slam the manual override lever on the car's primary door. The heavy metal slab groaned, parting by barely 3 feet as the moisture-laden wind of the valley rushed into the cabin, carrying the scent of rich earth, ozone, and something raw and musky.
Now, this car is just a very loud, shiny lunchbox. Everyone grab your emergency rations from beneath your seats. We are moving. Now.
Into the jungle?
The Solarian diplomat shrieked, his limbs shaking so violently he could barely stand.
On foot. That is suicide. The Deathworld fauna will sense our fear pheromones within meters.
If you stay on this bridge, you're a stationary target.
Miller said, uncoupling his kinetic rifle and cycling the bolt with a sharp, terrifying clack-clack that echoed through the panicked cabin.
The trees provide cover, thermal dampening, and a path to safety. If you want to live to file that complaint against Earth, you follow my boots and you do exactly what I tell you to do. No holos, no screaming, and if you drop something, you leave it behind. Move!
The tourists scrambled to their feet, following after Miller, not wanting to be left behind nor be near the Class-10 creatures. They broke from the observation car in an anxious, ungraceful line, their expensive footwear and luxury silk garments instantly ruined as they stepped out onto the narrow, rain-slicked maintenance catwalk of the suspension bridge. 50 meters below, the river roared against the jagged rocks, a churning torrent of black water illuminated only by the rhythmic, pale blue flashes of lightning. Tulak kept his datapad tucked tight against his chest, the lens angled over his shoulder to record their progress. The luxury vacation was officially dead. The Galactic network was now watching a raw, unedited descent into a primordial nightmare, driven not by the grand schemes of corporate villains, but by the simple, terrifying reality of a tourist who couldn't read a sign.
Keep your line tight.
Miller shouted over the roar of the wind, his wide-brimmed hat pinned against the storm as he led the group off the steel girders of the bridge and into the dense, giant ferns of the valley floor.
Watch the roots. The mud out here will swallow a small species whole if you aren't careful.
The moment their boots cleared the concrete foundation of the bridge pylon, the jungle closed in around them like a living wall. The light from the resort's artificial sun lamps was gone, replaced by a deep, suffocating darkness that seemed to muffle even the sound of the thunder. 100 meters into the brush, Miller suddenly stopped. He didn't raise his rifle, but his left hand flashed backward in a sharp, universal freeze signal. The tourists halted instantly, their breathing shallow and ragged. Through the dense, dripping leaves ahead of them, a massive shape was moving. It wasn't the slow, thunderous stride of the giant herbivores they had admired from the train. This movement was silent, fluid, and incredibly heavy. The camera lens on Tulak's datapad autofocuses as the light shifted. It was a Tyrannosaurus, but it didn't look like the mindless lizards from the old holos. Its body was covered in a dense coat of sleek, dark gray protofeathers that rustled softly as it stepped onto the wet soil. Its large, forward-facing golden eyes didn't look at the screen. They locked onto the stalled maglev train they had abandoned just 4 minutes ago, its massive snout nudging the side of the metal car with a devastating curiosity that made the steel frame buckle like paper.
Ranger!
Tulak whispered, his mandibles clicking in absolute panic.
It's right there. Use the rifle. Fire at its eyes.
Miller didn't move a muscle. He kept his back to the creature, his eyes scanning the dense undergrowth directly to their left.
That rifle uses high-grain kinetic slugs.
Miller whispered back, his voice entirely devoid of panic.
It'll crack a rhino's skull, but against a 6-ton theropod, it's just a very loud dinner bell. We don't fight the megafauna. Tulak, we let them get distracted by the shiny metal boxes, and we keep walking.
The human stepped forward into the mud, his stride rhythmic, unhurried, and perfectly balanced against the slick clay. The tourists didn't argue. They scrambled after him, desperate to stay within the shadow of the only creature on the moon who looked at an ancient apex predator and saw a manageable workplace hazard. Chapter 4. The 2 billion credit mistake. If there was a species designed to test the absolute limits of human patience, it was the high-caste coelitids. Director Zyler did not walk through the mud. He hovered slightly using a personal, high-end anti-grav harness, his crystalline, translucent robes pristine despite the downpour. As a senior executive for a core world banking syndicate, Zyler spent his life surrounded by automated security droids and planet-wide shield networks. To him, the concept of a primitive biological threat was a theoretical problem for lower-class species.
This is an absolute farce,
Zyler hissed, his vocal translators modulating his voice into a piercing, aristocratic chime that made Miller's jaw tighten.
I did not transfer 2 billion credits to Apex Genomics to be marched through a swamp by a primate holding a kinetic pipe. My personal schedule is far too valuable for this primitive exercise.
Director, turn off that anti-grav harness.
Miller whispered without breaking his stride, his eyes scanning the dense canopy of giant cycads.
The hum from that generator is emitting a low-frequency vibration. To the local fauna, you sound exactly like a wounded drone. Turn it off and walk on your own 2 feet.
I most certainly will not.
Zyler snapped, his crystalline form puffing out in a display of aristocratic indignation.
These robes are woven from pure orbital silk. I refuse to drag them through Deathworld sludge because your corporate engineers cannot maintain a simple electrical grid.
Tulak Vor kept his datapad angled backward as he scrambled through the ferns, the live chat on his stream feed scrolling, so fast it was a blur of white text. The Galactic viewers were already furious, filling the feed with angry emojis and demands for the human ranger to just leave the executive behind.
Ranger!
Tulak muttered, his lower hand scraping against a mossy trunk.
The stream. They are saying the coelitid is going to get us killed.
He's getting close.
Miller grunted, his thumb resting lightly on the safety of his kinetic rifle.
Just keep moving. We're less than 800 meters from the bunker ridge. Once we hit the concrete plaza, the automated backup systems can...
Miller froze. From the dense, dark foliage 40 meters behind them, a sharp, metallic ping cut through the sound of the rain. It was followed by a high-frequency, electronic chime, a cheerful, automated voice broadcasting through the humid jungle air.
Data sync complete. Connecting to Galactic core network via orbital satellite. Welcome, Director Zyler.
Every single alien tourist stopped dead in their tracks. Tulak's mandibles clicked open in sheer horror. Director Zyler was hovering 3 feet in the air, a massive, ultra-bright holographic display projecting from his personal luxury compad. The device wasn't just emitting a blinding, neon blue light that illuminated the entire dark jungle canopy. It was blasting a high-speed data signal directly into the clouds.
What are you doing?
Tulak shrieked, forgetting all protocols.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
I am securing my own rescue.
Zyler stated coldly, his fingers tapping the bright holographic screen.
I have just authorized a private extraction shuttle from the orbital station. I have no intention of spending another microcycle in this.
A shadow fell over the neon blue light. It didn't come from the ground. It descended from the high branches of a giant, ancient pine. The camera lens on Tulak's datapad autofocuses as the light shifted. It was a velociraptor, but it didn't look like the mindless lizards from the old Holos. Its body was covered in a dense coat of sleek, dark gray proto-feathers that rustled softly as it landed silently on a fallen log right at the edge of the holographic glow. Its large, forward-facing golden eyes didn't look at the screen. They locked onto the hovering, brightly lit coelid with unmistakable, calculating intelligence. On its inner toe, a single massive curved talon, 10 centimeters of razor-sharp calcium, tapped against the wood with a rhythmic, chilling sound. Click, click, click.
Director?
Miller's voice was a low, terrifying whisper that carried the weight of a death sentence.
Kill the hollow. Right now.
I will do no such thing. This device is protected by corporate encryption.
The gray raptor didn't hiss. It didn't roar. It simply let out a sharp, multitonal clicking sound from its throat. Instantly, 5 distinct chirps answered from the dark brush surrounding their entire perimeter. The glowing blue hologram hadn't just signaled an orbital satellite. It had acted as a giant neon dinner bell for the moon's highly coordinated pack hunters. They were already in the grass. They had formed a perfect perimeter net, and the trap was snapping shut.
Run.
Miller growled, his body shifting instantly into an aggressive, fluid stance as he raised the heavy kinetic rifle to his shoulder.
To the plaza. Go.
The Alpha Raptor launched itself from the log, but it didn't aim for the running crowd. It aimed straight for the source of the blinding blue light. With a terrifying, athletic spring, the animal slammed its 6-foot frame directly into Director Zyler's glittering holographic display. The impact was catastrophic. The raptor's sickle talons tore clean through the expensive anti-grav harness, short-circuiting the gravity coils with a violent splash of blue sparks. Zyler let out a high-pitched, completely unaristocratic shriek as his 2 billion credit luxury device was ripped from his grip, shattered into a dozen glowing plastic shards under the beast's heavy claws. The gravity field died instantly. The wealthy director tumbled face first out of the air, landing with a sickening, wet splat into a deep puddle of thick, black primeval mud. His pristine orbital silk robes were completely soaked in primordial sludge within seconds, his corporate dignity dissolving instantly into the swamp.
My data link! My robes!
Zyler screamed, scrambling on all fours like a panicked rodent, completely unconcerned with his schedules now.
Leave it!
Miller roared over his shoulder, firing a single, deafening kinetic slug into the dirt at the Alpha's feet to keep it from tearing the executive apart.
Move your legs, Director. Run.
The tourists scrambled to their feet, following after Miller's instructions, not wanting to be left behind, nor be near the Class-10 creatures. They broke into a frantic, undignified sprint through the thorns, the wet clay splashing over their faces as they fled toward the pale yellow light of dawn breaking through the canopy ahead. Chapter 5: The Dead Continent. By the time the survivors burst from the tree line, the concrete arrival courtyard of Bunker Alpha stretched out before them. Safety was less than 50 meters away, but the moment Miller's hand hit the biometric panel of the reinforced blast doors, the console didn't turn blue. It flashed a deep, lifeless violet.
Error.
A mechanical, automated voice droned from the door's internal speaker.
Substation grounding dead. Hydraulic seals locked by local grid failure.
It's completely bricked.
Miller muttered, his knuckles turning white against the heavy plasteel door. He turned around, his wide-brimmed hat drenched as he looked back at the exhausted, mud-covered alien tourists collapse against the concrete steps.
The Hanner short circuit didn't just drop the local sector. It triggered a cascade failure across the entire southern fault line. The localized backup systems are frozen tight.
What does that mean?
The Volus merchant gasped, his primary oxygen regulator whistling frantically as he clutched his side.
We are trapped outside. In the open.
Miller looked up at the massive, soaring artificial sun lamps that lined the dome's high ceiling. They weren't just dark, they were dead. Above them, through the reinforced atmospheric shielding, the true sky of the planet was visible, a dark, bruised sheet of rain clouds stretching for thousands of kilometers.
Pangea Prime isn't just a park loop.
Miller said, his voice dropping his tour guide warmth entirely, turning cold and level.
This terraformed landmass is the size of a Terran continent. This entire southern sector is 500,000 square kilometers of unmanaged, synthetic Jurassic ecosystem. If Bunker Alpha is dead, the next functional extraction hub is Outpost Sector 7.
Tulak Vor looked down at his datapad. A built-in mapping matrix flickered onto his screen, displaying their tiny, blinking beacon at the very edge of a massive, sprawling expanse of dark green topography.
Outpost 7.
Tulak's mandibles clicked in sheer disbelief.
Ranger, that is over 80 kilometers away. Through the deep interior valley. On foot.
84 kilometers.
Miller corrected calmly, unstrapping his kinetic rifle and checking the remaining thermal charges in his tactical vest.
The maglev tracks are dead. The heavy recovery shuttles can't land in this valley without a guidance beacon. And the local predators are currently realizing that the invisible fences aren't giving them headaches anymore. 84 kilometers through primeval swamp on foot is going to take us a full 26 hours of nonstop humping. If we stay here, the Alpha T-Rex will trace our scent to this concrete pad by nightfall. If we want to live, we start walking. Right now.
Over 26 hours.
Director Zyler shrieked, his voice cracking as he tried to wipe the thick, black primordial mud from his ruined orbital silks.
You expect individuals of our status to engage in a multi-cycle cross-continental trek through a Class 10 biological hazard zone?
I don't expect anything from you, Director. However, if you want to die, then be my guest.
Miller said, turning his back to the group and stepping toward the dark edge of the redwood forest.
But the local fauna does. They expect you to be slow, soft, and loud. If you want to prove them wrong, pick up your emergency pack and keep your mouth shut. We have a continent to cross.
Chapter 6. The Chronicles of the Deep Shadow Hour 1-2 Hour 4. The tree line vanishes, 6 to 10 o'clock local time. The concrete foundation of Bunker Alpha vanished behind them, replaced instantly by a floor of suffocating, ancient peat. For the first 4 hours, progress was agonizingly slow. The rain had settled into a fine, vertical gray mist that clung to the giant ferns, making every frond heavy and slick. Ranger Miller led from the front, his boots sinking exactly 3 inches into the mud before finding traction on the buried roots below. They managed barely 3 kilometers an hour as the trail dropped into a wide, flooded basin where the drainage grids had completely backed up due to the power failure. The water here was warm and stained a deep, tea-colored brown from centuries of decaying organic material.
The sulfur concentration is rising.
The Solarian diplomat muttered, his long, delicate digits extended to balance himself as the water reached his thighs.
Keep your feet moving.
Miller called back over his shoulder.
The shallow water attracts the smaller scavengers. Compsognathus packs hunt the margins. They won't tackle a healthy adult. But if you stop and let them think you're stuck, they'll start testing your garments for soft spots.
Hour 5 to Hour 9. The Redwood Colonnade, 10 to 1400 hours local time. By midday, they cleared the shallows only to enter a grove of genetically accelerated coast redwoods. These specimens weren't the juvenile trees of Earth's modern era. They were colossal, 100-meter-tall titans with trunks as wide as core world starship hulls. The canopy was so dense that it blocked 90% of the daylight, plunging the valley floor into an artificial night. The only illumination came from the faint green phosphorescence of engineered moss growing along the bark. It was here that the first real shift in the atmosphere occurred. The ambient sound of the jungle died instantly. Miller stopped, his hand snapping up in the freeze signal. From somewhere high above, within the deep, dark layers of the branch canopy, came a long, rhythmic scratching sound. It was heavy, like plasteel hooks dragging across solid timber. No one spoke. They waited for 40 long minutes until the sound receded into the upper fog, before Miller signaled them forward again. The strain was showing. They had covered less than 15 kilometers in 9 hours. Hour 10 to Hour 14. The Grease Trap Ridge, 14 to 1800 hours local time. As afternoon turned to evening, the terrain tilted sharply upward, forcing the survivors onto a steep, narrow ridge of loose shale and slick volcanic clay. Without the automated anti-grav paths that usually ferried tourists through this sector, the incline was a brutal physical trial. Director Zyler was forced to scramble on all 6 of his crystalline limbs, his breathing arriving in ragged, high-pitched harmonic whistles through his vocal translator.
This is an administrative crime.
Zyler hissed, his fingers scraping against the jagged shale.
I should not be crawling through dirt like a feral drone.
Your wealth doesn't weigh anything to gravity, Director.
Miller grunted from 5 meters above him, extending a heavy, mud-stained nylon rope down the slope.
Grab the line or stay on the ridge. The wind is picking up.
Hour 15 to Hour 19. The flooded meander, 18 to 2200 hours local time. Deep into the first night of the trek, they reached the crest of the ridge only to find the remains of Tour Shuttle 12. The automated vehicle had been derailed when the primary grounding rail died, its sleek, chrome-and-glass chassis thrown sideways into a thicket of giant horsetails. Miller used the butt of his rifle to cave in the plastic latch of an emergency locker, pulling out 6 standard Terran survival rations. After a brief 10-minute rest, the trail descended back into the valley floor, crossing a branch of the primary engineered river loop. The bridge here was nothing more than a fallen, 300-foot ancient log reinforced with high-traction plasteel mesh. Below them, the water was a churning torrent of black foam. The Volus merchant let out a high-pitched wheeze, his suit vents hissing in a desperate cycle. Without a word, Miller stepped backward down the log, hoisted the round, 60-kilogram merchant onto his own shoulders with a grunt of professional indifference, and carried him across the slick expanse while his boots precision-tracked the plasteel mesh. Hour 20 to hour 23. The silent bottleneck, 22 to 1 o'clock local time. The middle of the night brought a thick, warm, claustrophobic fog that reduced visibility to less than 4 meters. This was the hour of absolute sensory deprivation. They could not see the trees, they could not see the sky, and they could only track Miller by the faint, rhythmic squelch of his leather boots in the clay ahead. Then the subaudible vibration started small, a mere trembling in the mud before settling into that steady, bone-compressing rhythm that the survivors had learned to terrorize themselves with. The golden fastener on Director Zeiler's tunic began its rhythmic, metallic pinging against his chest. The valley narrowed into a steep, rocky throat where the stone walls rose hundreds of feet on either side. 50 meters ahead, where the mist clung to the jagged stone edges of the bottleneck, the shadow materialized. The Alpha Tyrannosaurus had bypassed them by using the high ridge trails during the silent hour. It stood in the center of the pass, its dark, feathered hide slicked down by the rain, its massive skull tilted slightly downward as its forward-facing golden eyes locked onto the 6 mud-covered intruders. Hour 24. The flare in the flank, 1 to 2 o'clock local time. This was the moment of the distraction. Miller didn't run. He stepped forward, his body perfectly balanced against the slick shale as he twisted the cap on the magnesium flare. The blinding, violent crimson light erupted into the gray valley, turning the canyon into a blood-red corridor. As the T-Rex flinched, its specialized nocturnal pupils redlining under the sudden influx of 100,000 lumens, Miller hurled the burning cylinder 60 meters into the thicket of dry cycad fronds on the right wall. The massive beast, driven by pure predatory instinct to track the moving heat signature rather than the stationary prey, lunged blindly into the brush after the glowing red object with a roar that shattered the remaining glass on Tulak's datapad frame.
Move!
Miller barked, his calm tour guide tone vanishing into a command that sent the survivors scrambling through the rocky throat of the pass, while the Colossus was busy tearing the burning ferns to pieces behind them. Hour 25 to hour 26. The Plaza Line, 2 to 8 o'clock local time. They ran for the remaining 6 hours without stopping, pushed by pure adrenaline and the terror of the dark. The shale gave way to a rough, unfinished gravel access road used by the park's heavy maintenance vehicles. The adrenaline from the encounter began to fade, leaving the tourists in a state of profound, bone-deep exhaustion. The Solarian diplomat was running on pure reflex, his limbs moving like mechanical levers while his eyes remained wide and glassy. Miller stayed at the rear now, his rifle unslung, his eyes tracking the dark tree line behind them to ensure the blinded Alpha hadn't recovered its tracking scent. At exactly 8 o'clock local time, 26 hours after they had abandoned Bunker Alpha, the gravel road finally smoothed out, transitioning into the wide, gray plasteel tiles of the Outpost Sector 7 arrival courtyard. The morning sun was finally breaking through the heavy clouds, casting long, pale orange beams across the concrete plaza. At the far end of the square, the primary extraction terminal stood like a fortress, its heavy hydraulic blast doors glowing with the steady, welcoming blue beacon of functional auxiliary power. They had crossed the continent. 84 kilometers of unmanaged Deathworld ecosystem lay behind them, carved into their memory hour by hour. As Miller stepped onto the plasteel tiles, his hand went down to his pocket, his fingers closing around the blue plastic clicker as the gray-feathered raptor pack began to emerge from the maintenance sheds ahead. Chapter 7, The Plaza Line. The courtyard wasn't empty. It was alive with a silent, terrifyingly coordinated movement. The gray-feathered velociraptor pack had anticipated the trail. The alpha female, a sleek, 6-foot hunter the Rangers called Cleo, stood atop a stalled baggage transport vehicle in the center of the plaza. Her body was covered in a dense coat of dark gray proto-feathers that rustled softly in the morning breeze. Her golden, forward-facing eyes rotated with an unmistakable, calculating intelligence as she watched the mud-covered survivors break from the tree line. On either side of the square, 11 more gray raptors slipped out from the shadows of the maintenance sheds, their long, muscular tails balanced perfectly parallel to the ground as they formed a synchronized perimeter net that blocked the terminal doors.
They cut us off.
The Solarian diplomat whispered, his knees buckling as he collapsed against a concrete planter box.
They knew we were heading for the extraction hub. They aren't animals. They're a military unit.
Miller stopped at the edge of the plasteel flooring. He looked down at his kinetic rifle, looked at the 12 raptors currently closing the circle, and then did something that made Tulak's mandibles click open in absolute horror. He unslung the rifle and placed it gently on the concrete floor inside the planter box.
Miller!
Tulak hissed, his secondary arms trembling as he reached out to grab the human's uniform cuff.
What are you doing? Keep the rifle. They are going to swarm us.
If I fire one round, the acoustic signature triggers a pack-wide defensive strike.
Miller said, his voice dropping into that low, level register that carried no trace of fear.
They'll swarm us from 3 sides before I can cycle the boat 4 times. Everyone stay in the box. Do not look them in the eye. Do not run.
The human walked directly onto the open concrete courtyard alone, his palms open and facing down toward the floor. The moment his leather boots struck the plasteel surface, every single gray raptor in the courtyard froze. Cleo leapt from the baggage vehicle, landing softly, her large, 10-centimeter sickle talon raised high off the ground to keep it from blunting against the concrete. Miller stopped exactly 10 meters from the Alpha. He reached into his tactical vest pocket and pulled out 2 small items, a rectangular block of dried, dark brown earth meat and a tiny, bright blue plastic mechanical device no larger than his thumb. Miller lifted his right hand, pointing a single, rigid index finger straight at the creature's nose. Click, click. The sound of the plastic device was sharp and metallic, echoing loudly across the silent courtyard. Cleo's body instantly jerked. Her forward momentum halted. Her head tilted to a sharp angle, the terrifying hiss cutting off, replaced by a strange, high-pitched inquiry chirp.
Cleo.
Miller said, his voice loud, steady, and entirely dominant.
Down. Down. You know better than this. This isn't your paddock.
The Alpha Raptor's tail dropped to the concrete. She lowered her hips, her long hind legs bending until her lower body rested flat against the plasteel surface. She sat down like an oversized, feathered hound. Click, click. Miller flipped the piece of dried meat through the air. Cleo's head flashed forward with a speed that the datapad's frame rate could barely register, catching the food midair with a sharp snap. But the social contract he had just forged with a handful of dried meat was about to be tested. From the dark tree line behind them, a new sound cut through the drizzle, a high, multitonal shriek that didn't belong to the gray-feathered pack in the plaza. It was sharper, wild.
The unmanaged packs.
The Solarian diplomat whimpered, his fingers digging into the artificial stone of the planter box.
They followed us from the interior valley. They aren't clicker-trained.
3 raptors burst from the ferns, their hides a dark, mottled green, completely different from the sleek gray variants under Miller's control. These were wild strays from the deep reserve, their ribs showing beneath tight skin, their amber eyes wide with the frantic, unhinged energy of starving predators. They didn't pause to analyze the human's posture. They saw meat on an open plain, and they charged.
Inside! Now!
Miller roared, his level tone vanishing into a command that rattled Tulak's eardrums. The tourists scrambled to their feet, breaking from the planter box in a blind, undignified stampede across the smooth concrete. The Volus merchant was rolling like an overinflated ball, while Tulak used his upper limbs to haul the Solarian along by his collar. Director Zyler, his silk robes dragging in the grime, was sprinting faster than anyone, his luxury pride thoroughly replaced by survival instinct. The wild green raptors closed the distance with sickening speed, their heavy 3-toed feet striking the plasteel flooring in a terrifying cadence, thump, thump, thump. Miller didn't run for the door. He didn't have the velocity to beat them. Instead, he twisted his torso back toward the sitting Alpha, his thumb striking the plastic clicker 3 times in rapid, violent succession, click click click, before hurling the entire remaining leather pouch of dried meat directly at the lead wild intruder.
Cleo, defend.
Miller barked. The gray alpha didn't look at the meat. Her golden eyes snapped toward the wild green invaders crossing into her territory. With a chest-deep rattle that vibrated through the soles of Tulak's boots, Cleo launched herself from her crouch. She moved like a gray blur of muscle and feathers, her massive sickle talon clearing the concrete by 6 feet as she intercepted the lead green raptor midair. The two predators slammed together with a sickening crunch of cartilage and bone. They tumbled across the plaza in a thrashing knot of gray and green, their jaws snapping like hydraulic shears. The remaining 2 wild raptors veered around the brawl, their focus locked entirely on the retreating tourists.
Tulak, don't look back.
Miller yelled, his boots skidding through the slime as he pivoted. Without his rifle, the human looked entirely defenseless against a 200-pound engine of teeth. But as the first green raptor lunged for the Solarian diplomat's trailing leg, Miller didn't dodge. He stepped into the strike, with a brute mechanical strength that made Tulak's secondary set of eyes widen in horror. The human caught the lunging monster by its muscular throat with his bare left hand. The impact drove Miller back 2 inches, his leather boots leaving black streaks on the concrete, but his grip held. The raptor's jaws snapped inches from his face, its hind legs thrashing wildly, trying to disembowel his torso with its curved talons. Miller didn't scream. He grunted, his right hand flashing to his tactical belt to pull a heavy, solid steel emergency flare. With a short, brutal arc, he slammed the heavy metal cylinder directly into the side of the raptor's skull. Once. Twice. The beast went limp, its jaw dropping open as Miller hurled its mass sideways into the final green attacker, tangling their limbs and sending them both skidding across the slick plasteel floor.
The doors.
The Volus wheezed, his round body slamming into the heavy relief valve of Outpost 7's primary airlock.
They're unlocking.
The massive plasteel slab groaned, parting by barely 3 feet as the terminal's localized generators engaged. Tulak threw himself through the gap first, spinning around to point his datapad back through the opening. The plaza was a slaughterhouse of motion. Cleo was standing over the motionless body of the green leader, her feathers drenched in dark crimson, her head tilted back as she let out a piercing, territorial screech that sent the remaining wild strays fleeing back into the high grass. Miller was backward sprinting toward the door, his breath coming in ragged, white plumes in the cool dawn air. He dived through the 3-foot gap just as the automated system re-engaged, the massive blast doors slamming shut behind him with a heavy, pressurized thud that cut off the sounds of the jungle instantly. For 5 long minutes, the only sound inside the dark, concrete airlock was the synchronized, frantic wheezing of 5 different species trying to convince their lungs they were still alive. Then, the high-frequency whine of a Concorde military transport engine began to rumble through the bunker's thick concrete roof. The rescue shuttle had finally arrived from orbit. Miller slowly rolled onto his side, looking over at Tulak, whose datapad was still hum-clicking as it processed the data. The human let out a weak, dry chuckle, wiping a fresh smudge of gray clay from his cheek.
See.
Miller croaked, his voice raw.
Told you. Cleo had the perimeter covered.
Chapter 8, The Viral Reckoning. The primary medical bay of the Concorde rescue transport was illuminated by a clean, Hilux white light that felt foreign after the dark red emergency glow of the valley. The gentle, rhythmic thrum of the ship's slipstream drive formed a soothing background melody that signalized their departure from Pangea Prime. Tulak Vor sat on the edge of a pristine white medical cot, his upper right hand holding his datapad while his other 3 limbs adjusted a thermal blanket around his shoulders. The datapad was hot to the touch, its internal processors strained to their limits by the sheer volume of notifications screaming through the subspace network. The upload was complete. The full, uninterrupted recording of their escape had cleared the planet's atmosphere and hit the galactic core network.
The view counter.
The Solarian diplomat muttered from a neighboring cot, his skin finally returning to its natural iridescent hue. He was staring at a wall-mounted monitor that displayed the live galactic information feeds.
It's broken through 14 trillion streams. The entire Central Assembly has suspended its legislative session to view it.
Apex Genomics stock values have experienced a total collapse.
The Volus merchant wheezed, his suit connected to a fresh oxygen line.
The board of directors is issuing a formal apology. But the public isn't listening. They are looking at the human.
In a corner cot, Director Zeiler sat in silence, wrapped in a generic foil survival blanket, his glittering corporate profile completely ruined as the live comment section of the Galactic stream widely mocked him across 3 sectors for short-circuiting his own rescue. Tulak turned his datapad toward the far corner of the medical bay. Ranger Miller sat on a low metallic bench beneath a ventilation duct. He had finally changed out of his soaked uniform shirt, wearing a simple, clean civilian garment. His heavy leather survival boots, still caked in the gray clay of the valley, were propped up on a clean plasteel diagnostics console. In his right hand, he held a large, chipped ceramic mug filled with a dark, steaming liquid that smelled faintly of burnt earth. The overhead monitor shifted its display to a live broadcast from the Galactic News Network. Anchor Creel's avian features were tense, his feathers ruffled as he addressed the screen.
We return to our breaking coverage of the Pangea Prime disaster.
The anchor's voice echoed through the medical bay.
Concord Military High Command has just completed an emergency session. Joining us now is General Vaughan of the Terranian Defensive Fleet. General, your analysts have been reviewing the Ranger log. What are the tactical implications for the Federation?
The screen cut to a high-ranking Terranian commander, his chitinous armor plates clicking softly as he leaned toward the lens with an expression of profound psychological distress.
The implications are catastrophic, Anchor.
General Vaughan stated, his primary mandibles twitching.
For centuries, our strategic doctrine has classified Earth as a quarantine zone because of its dangerous megafauna. We assumed the humans were merely a survivalist species that had managed to hide from their world's monsters. We were entirely wrong. Look at that footage. The human handler did not deploy automated defense networks or high-energy plasma fields. He used a tiny plastic clicking device and pieces of dried meat. He took a pack of social apex predators, creatures that could liquidate a vanguard company, and he reduced them to domestic gate guards through basic behavioral dominance. When an unruly tourist provoked a strike, the human literally fought an apex predator with his bare hands and a metal cylinder. Our tactical divisions have reviewed our own biological profiles. The Terranian infantry relies on pack hunting tactics and synchronized flanking maneuvers. To a human, we are not a terrifying military force. We are just another configuration of muscle and instinct that can be broken down, analyzed, and controlled with a pocket full of snacks. The Concord Council has just issued an emergency decree reclassifying the United Earth Systems as a Tier 1 diplomatic sovereignty. All fleet movements within 5 light years of their border are suspended. We are terrified of what will happen if the humans ever decide to leave their world and start looking for new things to domesticate.
Tulak lowered his datapad, stepping across the medical bay toward the low bench.
Miller, the network. Have you seen the feeds? The entire Corps is talking about you. They are calling you the tamer of the Deathworld.
Miller did not look up from his mug. He took a slow, methodical sip of his hot liquid, his eyes half closed with exhaustion. He let out a long, heavy sigh through his nose, his shoulders dropping.
A tamer?
Miller muttered, his voice gravelly from the humidity of the jungle.
It's clicker training, Tulak. My grandmother used it to keep her terriers from digging up her garden back in Ohio. Those raptors aren't even the hardest thing I've had to deal with this month.
Tulak blinked, his mandibles pausing.
You have faced worse than those demons?
Last Tuesday, a 3-ton triceratops got its horns wedged inside the main kitchen's grease trap because a kitchen worker left a crate of cabbage rolls by the back door.
Miller said, leaning his head back against the cold metal bulkhead of the ship.
It took me 4 hours, 3 gallons of industrial soap, and a forklift to get him out without him taking down the structural pillars. Cleo and her pack are vacation compared to that.
The human closed his eyes completely, his fingers loosening slightly around the ceramic mug as his breathing settled into a deep, rhythmic cycle of sleep. He lay there, completely unbothered by the fact that his casual professionalism had just rewritten the entire geopolitical balance of the known galaxy. Chapter 9, The Reckoning of the Jellies. The massive plasteel invoice slid across the obsidian table wasn't the end of the meeting. It was merely the opening movement of a public execution. Inside the high-security diplomatic lounge of the rescue transport, the 3 Hannah representatives, members of the prestigious First Order of the Ocean Soul, were flashing frantic, discordant strobes of deep violet and sickly yellow against the glass of their pressurized moisture tanks. Their mechanical translators hummed with high-frequency static as they realized Magistrate Vance wasn't leaving the room to negotiate. He was signaling the guards.
The Illuminate protests this aggressive posturing.
The lead Hanner's mechanical speaker chimed, its tone completely betrayed by the erratic, undulating twitching of its primary tentacles.
We are diplomats. We hold sovereign immunity under Section 4 of the Citadel Maritime Accord. You cannot subject spiritual pilgrims to primitive primate incarceration.
Sovereign immunity protects you from political disputes, Counselor.
Magistrate Vance said, his voice dropping an octave as he turned back to face the tanks. He pulled a second, crimson-bordered data slate from his breast pocket.
It does not protect you from a Class 1 criminal sabotage and mass involuntary manslaughter charge on a united Earth sovereign world. Your immunity was stripped the exact second your spiritual pilgrims cracked the biometric seals on a high-voltage military junction box.
The heavy automatic doors of the lounge hissed open. Two massive human security officers dressed in black, non-reflective tactical armor stepped into the room. They weren't carrying standard kinetic sidearms. They carried heavy, insulated pneumatic capture hooks and high-output neural-dampening rods designed to neutralize large aquatic organisms.
What is the meaning of this?
The Solarian translator for the Hanner delegation shrieked, backing away from the table.
Under the Earth Regulatory Bureau's Emergency Penal Code, the 5 primary instigators of the Sector 3 bypass are officially under arrest.
Vance stated, his expression flat and entirely devoid of human empathy.
They will not be returning to the Kaj homeworld on a luxury liner. They are being transferred to the maximum security suboceanic detention facility on Earth, specifically Sector 12 off the coast of New Zealand. It's 6,000 meters down, completely dark, and the water pressure will keep their mantles compressed enough that they won't be doing any spiritual flashing for the next 30 local years.
This is an outrage. The Ocean Soul will call for an immediate embargo of Terran luxury goods.
Let them.
Admiral Hackett growled, stepping up beside the tactical guards.
The transport shuttle is waiting in the lower hangar, gentlemen. Hook their tanks into the prisoner transit manifold. If they leak any more high alkaline moisture on my deck, charge them with destruction of military property.
The Hanner thrashing against the reinforced glass was pathetic, their long, iridescent limbs tangling in a chaotic knot as the heavy pneumatic lifts wheeled their pressurized enclosures out of the room. They had entered the park as untouchable, wealthy elite elites who believed the galaxy bent to their whims. They were leaving it in pressurized plastic crates, bound for the deepest, coldest trench on Earth. The Galactic feed, from amusement to horror. While the instigators were being hauled down to the brig, the Galactic network was experiencing a massive, multi-sector psychological breakdown. The initial viral wave of the Ranger log had been treated as high-stakes entertainment, a thrilling, exotic spectacle of a human handler beating back prehistoric monsters with a piece of plastic and raw Terran stubbornness. But as the full, unedited data dumps from the park's main server hub began to leak into the core news streams, the true cost of the Hanner Party's negligence hit the public square. On the Citadel Plaza, the massive, 100-meter holographic news screens were surrounded by tens of thousands of silent, horrified onlookers from a dozen different species.
We caution our viewers that the following footage from Sector 4 contains highly distressing content.
Anchor Creel's voice boomed from the overhead monitors, his avian features pale, his crown feathers flat against his skull.
This is the interior of Public Restroom Hub 09, exactly 3 hours after the southern grid collapse.
The screen shifted to a grainy, low-light security feed. A group of 7 Solarian tourists, wealthy tech investors from the Surkesh banking cartels, were huddled against the back wall of a reinforced plasteel comfort station. They had managed to engage the manual door lock, but the external power failure had left the structural dampening fields dead. Through the frosted plasteel glass of the front doors, the long, distinct silhouettes of 3 Dilophosaurs were visible. They weren't roaring or throwing themselves against the barrier like mindless animals. They were walking in slow, synchronized circles, their colorful neck frills twitching with a soft, rhythmic clack-clack-clack sound that echoed through the small bathroom speakers. Then, the lead predator tilted its head. With a fluid, terrifyingly deliberate motion of its snout, it nudged the manual emergency release valve on the exterior wall, a bright red handle designed for human safety access. The doors hissed open. The screen went to black a fraction of a second later, replaced by the stark, white logo of the Galactic News Network, but the audio feed continued for 4 long, agonizing seconds before cutting out. The sound of high-pitched Solarian panic cutting off into wet, muffled silence made the crowd in the Citadel Plaza gasp, several Asari diplomats covering their faces in absolute revulsion.
The death toll has now been officially revised to 42 verified casualties.
Anchor Creel continued, his voice shaking slightly.
Among the dead are 3 senior legislative aides to the Asari republics, the entire board of directors for the Elcor Mining Consortium, and 42 lower caste workers who were trapped in the maintenance tunnels beneath the Sector 3 drainage grids when the Hanner Party's high alkaline waste trail flooded the electrical conduits.
The public reaction was immediate and violent. Across the Hanner home sectors, anti-Illuminate protests erupted as lower caste citizens realized their high-ranking religious elites had caused a diplomatic nightmare that would compromise their entire economy. On the financial markets, the impact was a bloodbath. The Asari response, the price of complacency. In the high halls of the Citadel Council, the Asari High Counselor sat at her grand marble dais, her blue skin looking gray under the high-lux lights of the chamber. Behind her, a massive projection displayed the names of the 42 casualties, surrounded by a rolling scroll of angry demands for corporate accountability from every government in the core.
The Illuminate has offered financial restitution.
The Elcor ambassador boomed, his deep, slow voice carrying a rare, vibrating undertone of pure fury.
10 million credits per individual is an insult. Our leaders were liquidated because a group of gelatinous zealots wanted to hear a transformer hum. We demand full corporate asset seizure of every Hanner-owned holding within the Sol sector.
The United Earth Systems has already taken care of that, Ambassador.
The Asari counselor replied softly, her fingers pressing against her temples.
Magistrate Vance has already signed the executive order. Every credit, every starship, and every piece of orbital hardware belonging to the First Order of the Ocean Soul has been confiscated by Terran authorities to cover the structural reconstruction and the recovery operations.
She looked down at her personal terminal, where a message from the Asari Security Ministry was flashing in bright red text.
But the true crisis isn't financial.
She whispered, her voice carrying through the silent chamber.
The crisis is structural. For 3 centuries, our military doctrine has assumed that the galaxy's safety was guaranteed by our technological superiority. We built shields, we built automated defense networks, and we assumed we were safe from the raw, biological chaos of the universe. But look at what happened on Pangea Prime. The moment the power grid flickered for 12 hours, 42 of our wealthiest, most protected citizens were hunted down like livestock because they forgot how to run through the mud. They forgot how to climb a tree. They sat in a public restroom and waited for an automated repair drone that was never coming, while a 300-pound reptile figured out how to use a door handle.
She turned her head toward the video feed of Ranger Miller, still sleeping peacefully on his low metallic bench in the transport ship's medical bay, his mud-caked boots propped up on the diagnostic console.
The humans didn't build a park to show us dinosaurs.
The counselor said, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper.
They built a mirror, and what we saw inside it is that without our technology, we are the softest things in the dark.